The phone was ringing at 2:09 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had been awake for 20 minutes already, lying in the dark with my eyes open, listening to the rain hit the kitchen window in that soft, irregular way it does in October. Not a storm, just a persistent, quiet drizzle. The kind that seeps under doors and makes old houses smell like wet wood. My name is Maya. I am 31 years old. I am a registered bone marrow donor with type O negative blood. I have a postgraduate degree in biomedical science from the University of Edinburgh. I own a small consulting practice that I built from a single desk in a rented room in Manchester. I have not spoken to my parents in 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days. The phone rang again. I looked at the screen. The number was unfamiliar. A Manchester hospital switchboard. The kind of number you recognize without knowing why, because your body knows what it means before your brain does. I picked up. "Is this Maya Reeves?" A woman's voice. Calm, professional. The voice of someone trained to deliver information without catastrophizing it. "Yes." "This is Sister Annette Walsh at Northern General. I'm calling about a patient admitted tonight, Chloe Reeves. She listed you as her emergency contact." I sat up. Chloe, my sister. The person who had stood in my parents' kitchen 5 years ago and told them a lie so precise, so perfectly constructed, that it had ended my relationship with my entire family in the space of 40 minutes. "What happened?" I said. "She came in by ambulance at 1:47 this morning. Acute liver failure. She's critical. The medical team is requesting a blood relative for urgent compatibility assessment." I looked at the ceiling. The rain tapped the window. The room smelled like old wood and the chamomile tea I hadn't finished before bed. I had not spoken to my sister in 5 years. She had taken everything from me with a single lie. And she had put my name as her emergency contact. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. Welcome back to Quiet Desk Stories, where the truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how long it's been buried. I'm so glad you're here. If this is your first time joining us, hit that subscribe button and come be part of this community, because this story is going to stay with you for a long time. I promise. Let's go back to where it all started. I need to tell you about the lie before I tell you about the hospital. Because the hospital only makes sense when you understand what came before it. My parents, Graham and Diane Reeves, were married for 36 years. They met at a church hall in Salford in 1984, when my father was a trainee electrician, and my mother was teaching piano lessons to primary school children in the church annex. They were the kind of people who finished each other's sentences and argued about which way the tea towel should face on the oven handle. They were not a dramatic family. They were ordinary in the best way. Dependable, warm, stubborn about the small things, and generous about the large ones. Chloe was born 2 years after me. I was the quiet one. She was the one who sang in front of the whole school at age 7 without a single tremor in her voice, who could make adults laugh by saying exactly the wrong thing at exactly the right moment, who got lower marks than me in school but somehow always ended up with more friends, more invitations, more of whatever the room had to offer. I did not resent her for it. That is the truth. I had my own path. I had my science, my research, my small world of precise things that behaved the way they were supposed to when you understood them well enough. We were not close in the way that people imagine sisters are close, with late-night phone calls and shared wardrobes and an unspoken language. But we were family. I helped her revise for her A-levels. She drove 4 hours to bring me soup when I had pneumonia during my first year of postgraduate study. We were, in the way that most siblings are, people who would have done almost anything for each other. I have to believe she forgot that when she told the lie. I have to believe that, or I don't know how to make sense of any of it. I was 26 when it happened. It was March, a cold Sunday, the kind of day when the sky is so flat and gray it looks like a ceiling. My parents had asked me to come home for my father's 61st birthday. Just a Sunday lunch, nothing elaborate. My mother's roast lamb, the good china that only came out for birthdays and Christmas, a fruit cake she'd made herself because my father refused to eat shop-bought. I drove up from Manchester. I arrived at noon. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was watching football with his feet on the coffee table. Chloe was already there, sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of orange juice, wearing one of those big, chunky jumpers she always wore in winter, her hair pulled back. She looked nervous. At the time, I thought she was hungover. She'd had a rough few months. A relationship that had ended badly, a job she'd lost in December, a run of decisions that hadn't landed the way she'd hoped. I had lent her £2,400 in October to cover her rent. She hadn't paid it back, which I hadn't pushed because she was clearly struggling. I told myself we'd sort it when things settled. Lunch was fine. The lamb was good. My father told the same story he told every birthday, about the time he wired a building in 1989 and got the polarity wrong and all the lights flickered on and off for 40 minutes before anyone figured out what had happened. My mother laughed the way she always laughed at that story, which was genuinely as if she was hearing it for the first time. And then Chloe excused herself from the table. She came back 7 minutes later with something in her hand. A folded piece of paper. She set it on the table in front of my parents without looking at me. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for 3 months," she said. Her voice was steady. "And I don't know how to say it except to just say it." My mother looked at the paper. "What is that, love?" "It's a bank statement. Maya's bank statement." I stopped chewing. Chloe looked at my father. "Dad, I know you lent Maya money last April. £12,000 for her practice. She said it was a bridge loan while she waited for a grant to come through." My father nodded slowly. "We agreed she'd pay it back when the grant landed." The grant had landed. It had landed in June. £47,000 from the Northern England Medical Research Foundation, awarded to my consulting practice for a 3-year research partnership with 2 NHS trusts. It was the most significant professional achievement of my life. My parents had known about it. We had celebrated with a bottle of Prosecco over video call. I had not repaid the £12,000 yet, not because I'd forgotten, because I had been reinvesting everything back into the practice during its first full year of operation, and I had told myself I would repay them before Christmas in a lump sum. It was March. I had not repaid them. "She's been paying herself £8,500 a month since July," Chloe said quietly. "I saw it on her statement." She pushed the paper toward my father. "I wasn't trying to spy. She left herself logged into the banking app on my laptop when she visited in August. I didn't know what to do with it." My father looked at the statement. I want to be very careful about what I say next, because I have had 5 years to go over it, and I still cannot fully explain what happened in the following 20 minutes. The number on that statement was accurate. I had been paying myself £8,500 a month since July, because my practice was generating revenue, because that was an appropriate salary for someone running a small consulting firm, because I had hired an accountant who had advised exactly that level of draw at our trading volume. What was not accurate, what was the lie at the center of everything, was the implication. Chloe did not say, "Maya has forgotten to repay you." She did not say, "Maya's salary seems high compared to what you lent her." She did not say any of the things that would have been factual and fair. What she said, in a voice so soft and regretful that it sounded like genuine sorrow, was this: "She's been paying herself all this money and she's had the grant since June, and she still hasn't paid you back. I thought you should know, because I think she was never planning to." She looked at my parents, not at me, at them, and I watched my parents' faces change. I tried to explain. I said I had the repayment plan for Christmas. I said I had documentation. An email to my accountant from November explicitly flagging the repayment. I said I had never had any intention of defaulting. My mother's face was the one that broke me. Not angry, just hurt. In that particular way that only happens when someone you trust has confirmed a fear you didn't know you were carrying. My father said, "If you were going to pay it back, why didn't you just say that when you came in?" I said, "Because it didn't come up. Because I assumed we were fine." My father said, "We're clearly not fine." Chloe said nothing. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on the table, performing a grief she had calculated in advance. By 3 o'clock, I was driving back to Manchester in the rain. My father had not hugged me goodbye. My mother had cried in the kitchen while I put my coat on. Chloe had sat in the living room the entire time with a cup of tea she didn't drink. I sent 11 messages over the following 3 weeks. I sent the email chain with my accountant. I sent a transfer of £12,000 on the 28th of March, the full amount, with a note that said, "This is what I owed. I am sorry it took longer than planned. I love you." Neither of my parents acknowledged it. In April, my mother called, but not to reconcile, to tell me that they had decided they needed space from the situation, that Chloe had shared things that had worried them, that they needed time. I said, "What things? She told you a lie." My mother said, "We just need some time, Maya." I called Chloe that same evening. She picked up on the third ring. "You told them I was stealing from them," I said. "I told them what I saw." "You framed it. You know exactly what you did." Chloe was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You lent me money and then made me feel guilty about it for 6 months. I just leveled the field." I couldn't speak. I literally could not produce a sound for about 4 seconds. Then I said, "You leveled the field by telling our parents I was deliberately stealing from them." She said, "I didn't use that word." I said, "Chloe." She hung up. I did not contact my parents again. Not because I stopped loving them. I never stopped. But because I had sent the money. I had sent the evidence. I had said everything there was to say. And they had chosen her version. Every person has a point at which they stop knocking on a door that stays shut. I found mine in April of that year, on a Tuesday morning, sitting on my kitchen floor with the phone in my hand and a silence on the other end that had become permanent. 5 years, 2 months, 11 days. And now, 2:09 in the morning, a hospital switchboard, acute liver failure, and my name on my sister's emergency contact form. I drove to Northern General in 23 minutes. I know because I checked the time when I pulled into the car park and subtracted it from 2:09. I don't know why I tracked the exact minute. I think my brain had gone into the mode it goes into when things become suddenly critical. The mode where precise measurement is the only control I have. The entrance to A&E at that time of night is a particular kind of place. Fluorescent light that makes everyone look like they haven't slept in 40 hours. A receptionist behind perspex. The antiseptic smell that is not quite clean and not quite chemical. Something between the two that lives in your sinuses long after you've left. I told the receptionist my name. She made a phone call. Sister Annette Walsh met me at the triage desk 4 minutes later. She was 50-something, with short silver hair and the quiet efficiency of someone who had managed crises every night for 30 years. She walked me through what they knew. Chloe had been brought in by ambulance at 1:47 a.m. following a collapse at her home address, a flat in Didsbury. She'd apparently been found by her flatmate, Priya, who had called 999. The initial assessment showed acute liver failure, elevated bilirubin, severely compromised function across multiple markers. Her INR, the measure of how well her blood clots, was 4.3. Normal is between 0.9 and 1.2. At 4.3, the risk of internal bleeding was critical. The liver wasn't functioning well enough to sustain her without intervention. What kind of intervention? I asked. Sister Walsh looked at me carefully. The consultants will explain the full clinical picture, but the initial assessment team has flagged the possibility of transplant evaluation, depending on how the next several hours develop. I heard the word transplant and felt something drop in my chest. Not a feeling, more like a physical weight, a density, as if the air in the room had thickened. I'm type O negative, I said. I'm on the bone marrow donor register. I've been a registered living donor candidate since my postgrad. She nodded. That's part of why the team wanted to speak with you directly. Before we get there, is there anything you can tell me about her medical history? Family liver conditions, medications, alcohol use, anything recent? I thought about the last 5 years. I didn't know what Chloe had been doing. I didn't know who she was living with before Priya. I didn't know what she was eating or drinking or taking. I knew nothing about my sister's life because I had not been a part of it. I've been estranged from her for 5 years, I said. I can't tell you anything recent. Walsh wrote something down. Is there anyone else? Parents, relatives? My parents. I gave her their number. They'll come. They'll come immediately. I said that last part without thinking about what it meant. My parents would come, and when they arrived, we would be in the same building for the first time in 5 years and 2 months. I sat down in a plastic chair in the family waiting area. It was 2:38 in the morning. The room smelled like machine coffee and something stale underneath. There was a television mounted on the wall playing a property program on mute. A man 3 seats away was asleep with his head against the wall, still wearing a paint-stained jacket. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, which meant she had been awake. Hello? I said. It's Maya. Don't hang up. Chloe is at Northern General. Acute liver failure. You need to come. Silence for 3 seconds. Then, what? What happened? She collapsed tonight. She's critical. They're running assessments. You and Dad need to get here. My mother made a sound I had never heard her make before. Not a cry, not a gasp. Something quieter than both. A sound that was just breath and terror in equal measure. We're coming, she said. We're coming right now. She didn't say my name. She didn't say anything else. The call ended. I put the phone face down on the seat beside me and looked at the muted television. A couple on the screen was standing in a kitchen with exposed brick, nodding at a presenter. Everything about the image was absurdly ordinary. I thought, the last time my mother heard my voice, it was to explain that I was not a thief. I thought, the last time I was in the same room as my father, he didn't hug me goodbye. I thought, Chloe put my name on her emergency contact form. That was the thought I kept returning to. Not resentment, not tenderness, just that fact. She had a flatmate, Priya, who cared enough to call 999. She had presumably friends. She had our parents, who would have answered any call she made. And she had put my name. I didn't know what it meant yet. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. At 3:14 in the morning, my parents walked into the family waiting area. My father looked the same, a little more gray at the temples, a little more hollowed around the eyes, the way people look when they have aged in the way that life ages you rather than time. My mother was wearing her coat over her pajamas. She had clearly dressed in the dark. Her hair was loose. She was holding her handbag against her chest like a shield. She saw me first. I stood up. I didn't know what to do with my face. I had spent 5 years not standing in the same room as my mother, and now she was 3 meters away and she looked frightened and small and older than I remembered. She walked toward me and put her arms around me without saying a word. I stood there for a moment with my hands at my sides. Then I put my arms around her. She was shaking. Not crying, or not yet. Just shaking. The way people shake when the adrenaline of a nighttime crisis phone call hasn't finished running through them. My father stopped about 2 meters back. He looked at me. His jaw was tight. He had the expression of a man managing too many things at once. "How bad is it?" he said. "Critical," I said. "Acute liver failure. They're still running assessments. A transplant team is being consulted, depending on how she responds in the next few hours." My father closed his eyes for 2 seconds. Just 2. Then he opened them. They called you for a reason?" he said. "I'm a compatible blood type, O negative, and I'm already a registered living donor candidate, so yes." He looked at me for a long moment. Something crossed his face that I couldn't name. Then he sat down in the chair next to where I'd been sitting, and he folded his hands in his lap, and he looked at the floor. My mother hadn't let go of my arm. If you've ever been in a hospital at 3 in the morning with someone you love who might be dying, and someone in that waiting room is a person you haven't spoken to in years, you know that the grief and the history collapse into each other in a way you can't prepare for. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to choose between your pain and someone else's emergency? I want to hear from you. And if you're new to Quiet Desk Stories, please subscribe before the next part, because this story is far from over. At 4:22 in the morning, a consultant hepatologist named Dr. Farida Osei came into the family waiting area. She was 38 years old, brisk, direct, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck that she put on before opening her clipboard and took off the moment she finished reading. She had the specific energy of someone who had been awake for at least 17 hours and still moved with the precision and authority of the first hour of their shift. She introduced herself and sat down across from us. She explained Chloe's condition in clear, careful terms. Chloe had acute liver failure, driven by autoimmune hepatitis, a condition in which the immune system attacks the liver's own cells. It was not caused by alcohol. It was not caused by drugs. It was an autoimmune condition that had been either undiagnosed or inadequately managed, and it had now progressed to a crisis point. Her liver was functioning at approximately 19% of normal capacity. Her bilirubin was critically elevated. Her clotting function was severely impaired. Without significant intervention, Dr. Osei said, we are looking at a very serious prognosis within the next 48 to 72 hours. My mother gripped my arm. What does intervention look like? My father asked. Immediate immunosuppression to attempt to slow the autoimmune attack. High-dose corticosteroids. Plasma exchange to reduce the toxic load on the remaining liver function. And, she looked at me, if she does not respond adequately to those measures within 24 to 36 hours, we need to begin urgent transplant evaluation, which means identifying a compatible living donor if a deceased donor organ is not available in that window. My father looked at me. I said, what do you need from me? Dr. Osei said, a full compatibility workup, blood type, tissue matching, liver volumetric assessment, functional tests. It takes approximately 6 hours for the initial panel. We would need to start immediately. Start it, I said. My mother made a sound again, that same quiet sound from the phone call, breath and terror compressed into a single exhale. Dr. Osei left to arrange the panel. A phlebotomist came within 12 minutes. She was a young woman named Rosa. She smelled like the hand sanitizer dispenser by the door and wore her hair in 2 neat braids. and she took 7 vials of blood from my right arm with the efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times, which she probably had. My parents sat across from me while Rosa worked. My father watched. My mother looked at her hands. After Rosa left, we sat in the quiet for several minutes. The television was still on mute. The man in the paint-stained jacket had gone. It was just the three of us and the machine coffee smell and the flat October dark beyond the windows. My father said, "Maya." It was the first time he had said my name since I'd arrived. I looked at him. He stopped, started again. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Okay." "That money, the 12,000. Were you ever—" He stopped again. I said, "No. I was never not planning to repay it. You know I sent it in March. You know I sent the email chain from my accountant. You know all of that." He nodded, slowly. "I know." "Then why—" "Because Chloe was there," he said. "And she was certain. And you weren't there to—" He exhaled. "She was very certain, Maya." I looked at my father. My father, who had held my hand when I graduated, who had driven me to every science competition I'd ever entered when I was 12 and 13 and 14, who had once taken a day off work to sit with me in a hospital waiting room when a friend of mine had a bad accident and I couldn't be alone. I said, "She lied to you, Dad." He didn't argue. My mother said, very quietly, "We know." I turned to look at her. She said, "We figured it out." She looked down at her handbag. "Not immediately. It took a few months. We found some things. Chloe said some things later that didn't add up. And then, your father spoke to David Hartley." David Hartley was my accountant, the one who had been copied on the repayment email. "He showed us the full chain. Not because you asked him to. He contacted us himself. He said he was concerned that a misunderstanding was affecting our relationship with you." I stared at her. "We knew within about 8 months," she said. "We knew it wasn't what Chloe had made it seem." 8 months. I had been estranged from my parents for 5 years, and they had known within 8 months that the story Chloe told them was not accurate. And still, 5 years of silence. I said, "Why didn't you call me?" My mother's eyes were wet. She pressed her lips together. "Because we didn't know how. Because we'd let it go so long. Because every month that passed made it harder. Because we were ashamed of ourselves, Maya. We were ashamed." My father was looking at the floor. I sat with that for a long time. The machine coffee smell. The muted television. The October dark pressing against the windows. "Chloe never told you she'd said anything wrong?" I said. My mother shook her head. "Not directly. She implied there had been a misunderstanding. She never—" She stopped. "She never apologized for what she did. Not to us, not to you. She just let it continue." I thought of Chloe, in a hospital bed 50 meters away, with 19% liver function and a body that was attacking itself. I thought of her putting my name on the emergency contact form. She knew. She knew what she'd done, and she put my name on that form anyway, which meant something. I wasn't sure what, but it meant something. David Hartley had called my parents 8 months after the lie. My parents had known for over 4 years. And for 4 years, they had sat with that knowledge and done nothing. Not because they didn't want to fix it, but because the distance had grown so large that they couldn't find the door. I am not going to tell you that the waiting room felt warm after that. It didn't. It was cold and fluorescent and slightly too quiet for a Tuesday at 4 in the morning. But something shifted in it. Something that had been sealed for 5 years cracked open by about an inch, which is not the same as being fully open, but is at least no longer sealed. My father looked up from the floor. He said, "You came. You're here. You're giving blood for tests at 4 in the morning for someone who—" "She's my sister," I said. He nodded. His jaw was tight. He looked exactly like the man who had held my hand at every science competition, except older and more tired and carrying something heavy that he didn't know how to put down yet. "Yes," he said. "She is." At 8:47 in the morning, Dr. Osei came back. She had my compatibility panel results. I was, she said, a strong candidate across the primary markers: tissue type compatibility, blood group match, preliminary volumetric assessment. She used words like fenestrated hepatic architecture and lobar proportion and functional reserve, and I understood all of them because I had spent 7 years studying biomedical science and 3 years consulting for NHS research programs. I understood what she was saying. My liver was the right shape, the right size, the right type, and it was functioning at 100%. Chloe had responded partially to the overnight corticosteroid therapy. Her bilirubin had not dropped as sharply as the team had hoped. The autoimmune markers were still elevated. The plasma exchange had bought some stability, but stability was not improvement. "She is not out of danger," Dr. Osei said. "If she does not show significant improvement by tomorrow morning, we will need to move to urgent transplant assessment." "What does significant improvement mean in exact terms?" I asked. Dr. Osei gave me specific numbers: bilirubin below 45 micromoles per liter, INR below 2.0, measurable improvement in synthetic function. She would reassess at 6 o'clock that evening. She asked if I wanted to see Chloe. My parents looked at me. I said yes. Chloe was in a side room on the hepatology ward, 3rd floor, the kind of ward that smells like all hospital wards smell: antiseptic and recycled air, and underneath it something human and exhausted. She was connected to a monitor, an IV line in her left arm, her hair loose against the pillow the way it always was when she slept. She looked thin, thinner than I remembered. Her skin had the yellow tinge of elevated bilirubin, a color I had learned about in textbooks and had never expected to see on my sister's face. She was awake when I walked in. She looked at me. She did not look surprised. She looked like someone who had been waiting. "Maya," she said. Her voice was hoarse, from the intubation they'd done in A&E to help her breathe through the initial crisis. I stood at the foot of the bed. I didn't pull up a chair. Not yet. "You put my name," I said. "Yes." "Why?" She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at me. "Because I knew you'd come." "You knew I'd come after what you did." "Because of what you're like." She said it simply, not as flattery, but as fact. "Because you're the kind of person who comes." I stood there. The monitor beeped every 4 seconds. The IV drip was slow and measured. The room smelled like iodine and something floral. A small bunch of white chrysanthemums on the windowsill, left by someone before this crisis. Slightly wilted now. "I need you to tell me something," I said. She nodded, just once. "Did you know, when you sat down at that table and put that bank statement in front of Mom and Dad, did you know what you were doing?" Chloe was quiet for a long time. The monitor beeped 8 times. 9. 10. Then she said, "Yes." I exhaled. "I was angry," she said. "I was so angry and I was so scared. And I owed you money and you were doing so well and I was—" She stopped. "I was failing at everything. And you were kind about it in this way that felt like pity. And I hated it. I hated you a little bit for being fine when I wasn't." "So you told them I was stealing?" "I didn't use—" "Chloe." My voice was flat. Not loud, just flat. She stopped. "You framed it so they would believe the worst. You know that. And they did. And I lost 5 years." She looked at me. Her eyes were very bright, the way eyes go when people are too exhausted to maintain any kind of careful expression. "I know," she said. "I know what I did." I pulled up the chair then. I sat down. "Tell me one more thing. The emergency contact form. When did you fill it in?" She hesitated. "About 3 months ago." 3 months ago? Why? She looked at the chrysanthemums on the windowsill. "Because I was scared. I'd had some results back. My liver enzymes had been elevated for a year. My GP was monitoring it, and I knew it was getting worse, and I didn't want to put Mom and Dad because I knew they'd panic. And Priya's great, but she's not family." She looked back at me. "You were family. Even after everything. Even after what I'd done. You were still the person I put." I looked at my sister. 31 years old. Yellow-skinned, thin, frightened, attached to a monitor. The same person who had driven 4 hours in the rain with soup when I had pneumonia. The same person who had sat at a kitchen table and dismantled my family with a piece of paper and a carefully modulated voice. Both of those things were true at the same time. "Did you tell Mom and Dad?" I said. "About being frightened? About your liver?" "No." "Did you tell them you'd lied?" "I told them there had been a misunderstanding. I couldn't say the whole thing." "David Hartley told them," I said. 8 months later. They've known the truth for over 4 years. Something moved across Chloe's face. Shock, I think. Genuine shock. "What?" "They knew. They just couldn't figure out how to call me." She was quiet again. The monitor beeped. The drip ran its slow, measured pace. "So they've been sitting with it," she said. "All this time?" "Yes." She closed her eyes, opened them. "That's my fault, too." "Yes," I said. "It is." We sat in a silence that was not comfortable and was not hostile. It was the specific silence of two people who have a great deal of history between them that has not been sorted, and who are in a hospital room at 8:50 in the morning with no energy to sort all of it right now. "The doctors say you're compatible," Chloe said, carefully, as if it was a question she was afraid to ask. "For now," I said. "They're running full assessments. If the medication doesn't work, they'll need to evaluate further." "And you're—" She stopped. "You're still here, after everything." I looked at my sister. "You're my sister," I said. "Whatever you did, however long it's been, you're my sister. And I'm here." Chloe closed her eyes. A tear ran sideways across her face and disappeared into the pillow. She didn't make a sound. She just lay there with her eyes closed and a tear running down her cheek. And I sat in the chair at the foot of the bed and watched my sister cry, and thought about 5 years and 2,400 pounds, and the lie told at a kitchen table in March, and the specific sound of rain on the window at 2:09 in the morning when the phone rings. At 6 o'clock that evening, Dr. Osei came back. The results were better. Not dramatically, not the kind of improvement you see in films where the chart suddenly recovers and everyone smiles, but measurably better. The bilirubin had dropped to 41 micromoles. The INR was moving in the right direction. The corticosteroid therapy was working. "She is not yet out of danger," Dr. Osei said. "But the trajectory is positive. We will continue to monitor. If she maintains this improvement over the next 36 hours, the immediate transplant window may not be necessary." My mother covered her face with both hands. My father put his arm around her. I sat across from them in the family waiting area and thought, 36 hours, one more night, and then another assessment, and then we would know. Dr. Osei looked at me. "Your compatibility panel results are strong, Ms. Reeves. If the situation changes, you remain the primary candidate. We'll keep the evaluation active regardless." "Yes," I said. "Keep it active." She nodded. She left. My father looked at me. He had the same expression as before. Too many things at once, all of them heavy. "Maya," he said. I looked at him. He said, "I'm sorry." Not elaborately, not with extensive qualification. Just that. 2 words that carry everything else when the person who says them means them. I nodded. "I know." My mother lowered her hands from her face. Her eyes were red. "Can we—" She stopped. "Can we talk about this properly? Not now, not tonight, but properly. Can we do that?" "Yes," I said. "We can do that." "Soon?" "Yes, soon." My mother reached across and put her hand over mine. She didn't say anything. She just held it there, warm, dry, the same hand that had made roast lamb and fruitcake, and held mine when I was very small and still needed holding. Chloe spent 11 days in Northern General. The autoimmune hepatitis responded to the corticosteroid therapy over the first 4 days. By day 5, her bilirubin had dropped to within the upper range of abnormal, rather than critical. By day 8, her clotting function had improved enough that the immediate transplant evaluation was formally suspended. She was not cured. Autoimmune hepatitis is a managed condition, not a resolved one. She would be on immunosuppressive medication for the foreseeable future. She would have regular monitoring. She would need to make significant changes to how she managed her health. But she was alive, and she was going to stay that way. My compatibility panel stayed on file at the transplant unit. Dr. Osei explained that this was standard practice. Once registered as a candidate for a specific patient, the records were kept active for ongoing reference. I am still, at this moment, on that file. I don't mind. On the day Chloe was discharged, my mother brought the good china to Chloe's flat. Not for any dramatic reason. She just said she wanted to have a proper meal together, and the good china was what you used when something mattered. Priya cooked, which turned out to be a significant contribution because she made a lamb biryani that was, genuinely, the best thing I had eaten in years. My father washed up. My mother sat at the small kitchen table with Chloe and held both her hands and talked about nothing particularly important for 20 minutes, which is what you do when you have been frightened about someone and they are now sitting in front of you. At some point, Chloe looked at me across the table. I was sitting at the far end, slightly separate, still finding my footing in a version of this family that had been apart for 5 years and was now, tentatively, carefully, provisionally beginning to reassemble. She said, "I owe you an apology." I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm going to give you one. A proper one. Not now. I'm too tired right now and I want to do it properly. But I'm going to." I said, "Okay." She said, "And the 2,400 pounds. I looked at her. She said, "I know. I know it's been 5 years. I know it's not about the money. but I'm paying it back. With interest. Something about the word interest made my father laugh. A short, startled laugh, the kind that escapes before you've decided to allow it. Which made my mother smile. Which made Priya ask what was funny, which required explanation, which led to a version of the story being told at the kitchen table of a small flat in Didsbury at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. And somehow, in the telling of it, the weight of it shifted slightly. Not gone, never fully gone, but shifted. I left at 9 o'clock. I drove home through Manchester with the radio off and the windows down a little, the October air coming in cold and damp. The streets were quiet. The city does that on weekday evenings. Empties out, returns to something like itself, the neon signs of closed restaurants reflecting in wet pavements. I parked outside my flat. I sat in the car for a while. The thing about 5 years is that it is not recovered in an evening. You do not spend 62 months without your family and then have dinner with the good china and find yourself returned to exactly where you were. That is not how it works. What had happened in those 11 days was not a resolution. It was more like the beginning of the possibility of a resolution. A door that had been sealed for a very long time had been opened by an inch or two, and now the question was what we all chose to do about it. My mother called me on the Sunday after Chloe came home. She asked if I wanted to come for lunch. Not for a birthday, not for an occasion, just lunch. My father's roast lamb, the good china. I said yes. She said, "Same time? Noon?" I said, "I'll bring a fruitcake. Shop bought, I'm afraid." She laughed. It sounded exactly the way her laugh had always sounded, which is to say, like something I had missed without quite knowing I was missing it, until I heard it again. I drove up on the following Sunday. I arrived at noon. The house smelled like roast lamb and the oak dresser that had been in the hallway since before I was born. My father was watching football with his feet on the coffee table. He muted it when I came in and stood up and hugged me, properly, with both arms, the kind of hug that says the things that haven't been said yet. We didn't talk about everything at once. We didn't sit down and do a formal accounting of the 5 years. We had lunch. My father told the story about the 1989 electrical wiring incident. My mother laughed as if she'd never heard it before. I ate too much lamb and had a second slice of the fruitcake I'd brought, which was perfectly decent despite being shop-bought, whatever my father might say. Chloe wasn't there. She was at a follow-up appointment. She had them every 3 weeks now for the foreseeable future. My mother said she'd told Chloe I was coming. Chloe had said, "Good. Just good." Before I left, I stood at the kitchen window for a moment while my mother made tea. The back garden was October bare. The apple tree had dropped its leaves. The beds were empty. The grass had that slightly yellow quality it gets in autumn. It was an ordinary garden. It was the garden I'd grown up looking at. I thought, 5 years is a long time to be away from something ordinary that you love. My mother handed me a mug. I held it with both hands because it was cold in the kitchen. The radiator in there had always taken too long to heat up. She stood beside me, and we looked at the garden together. She said, "I'm glad you came. To the hospital. I'm glad you didn't let... I'm glad you came." I said, "I'm glad I came too." She said, "You know you didn't have to. After what we did." I said, "I know." She looked at the garden. "What made you?" I thought about it for a moment. The 209 call. The hospital switchboard. The name on the emergency contact form. I said, "She put my name." My mother nodded. She understood what that meant without me explaining it. "She knew you'd come," my mother said. "Yes," I said. She did. That's Maya's story. 5 years of silence, a lie that cost far more than the person who told it ever intended. And a sister who, even after everything, knew one true thing: that when it mattered, Maya would show up. If this story made you think about someone you haven't spoken to in a while, maybe today is the day to pick up the phone. Not because everything is resolved, not because the hurt has gone, but because sometimes a door being opened by an inch is the beginning of something that matters. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to show up for someone who hurt you? And if this story reached you tonight, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you so much for spending this time with me here at Quiet Desk Stories. Subscribe if you haven't already. I read every single comment. I'll see you in the next one.